Hi, I'm Dave. I collect vintage Viewmasters, and this is the story behind one very interesting reel. It's clearly different, lots of codes on the sleeve, and the pictures are of a German Messerschmitt. This wasn't a normal Viewmaster reel, it looked military, it looked important. What was it? In this video, we're gonna find out. I looked at the codes on the sleeve for clues. This code had meaning. W meant War Department, and 33-038 referred to the procurement office at Wright Field in Ohio. Searching through documents from there, I found this index of specifications, so I looked up 24908, which should describe exactly what the reel was, but the only reference called it a disc stereoscopic still picture, cancelled 23rd of February 1951. Not that helpful. However, this code format was only used after 1944, and the term War Department wasn't used after 1947 when it split into the Department of the Army and the Department of the Air Force. Between 44 and 47, the three-dimension company made slide projectors in Chicago. Sawyers must have needed to contract them to take the pictures, but what for? The obvious clues had run out. This reel wasn't giving up its secrets easily. If I wanted answers, I was gonna have to dig much deeper. And when the pieces came together, this reel revealed a story of secret projects, German spies, and the astonishing role William Gruber and Viewmaster played during World War II. William Gruber was a German immigrant and piano repairman who came to America in 1924. He invented the Viewmaster in 1938 and partnered with Harold Graves and the Sawyers Company in Portland, Oregon to produce and sell his new invention. The task seemed impossible: travel the country taking hundreds of photographs, come up with a way to mass produce the reels, and design a portable viewer to make it all work. They wanted to show off their invention at the New York World's Fair, which opened April 30th, 1939, but that was only 10 months away, so the team scrambled to finish a working model before the fair closed in the fall. But by mid-1939, they'd run into a serious problem. The viewer needed lenses in the eyepieces to focus the images properly, and none of the US manufacturers were acceptable, either too expensive or too low quality. Gruber suggested using a leading astronomical device maker from his hometown in Munich, the Steinheil Optical Institute, maker of telescopes for German observatories since 1855. Graves agreed and gave Gruber $1,000 to place an order. Gruber sent the money to his brother Karl in Germany, who went to Steinheil to place the order. But September 1939 brought chaos. Hitler invaded Poland, and the US began an embargo of German products, so Sawyers decided to cancel the order. Karl wired the money directly back to Gruber's bank in New York. The money arrived safely, but it hadn't arrived unnoticed. Sawyers used the inferior US lenses to make their first viewers, which were ready in October of 1939, just weeks before the fair closed for the year. A lucky few got to see the very first Viewmaster at the New York World's Fair that year. Here's an ad from November of '39. It's one of the first dealers to resell Viewmasters just in time for Christmas. In 1940, Sawyers leveraged the second year of the World's Fair and the Golden Gate International Expo in San Francisco to promote the product nationwide. Their dealer network grew to over 1,000 by the year's end. Viewmaster thrived for over 2 years, but in December 1941, Pearl Harbor didn't just draw America into war, it thrust William Gruber, his invention, and everything he'd built into a conflict that would test his very freedom. The US entering the war had profound effects on Sawyers, Viewmaster, and everyone involved, but one problem stood above the rest: rationing. Sawyers relied on one key ingredient: film. The government needed the nitrocellulose used in 35mm film to make explosives. As the motion picture Herald warned in May of 1942, "We are getting tidings of priority allotments and film rationing ideas out of Washington now because motion picture film and gunpowder are in competition." Viewmaster reels used 16mm acetate-based safety film, but unfortunately, the government restricted all film availability. Film rationing instantly halted Viewmaster's explosive growth and threatened to destroy Sawyer's core postcard business. The entire company and Gruber's dreams hung by a thread.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'll be very glad to tell my story.
While America reveled in the World's Fair in New York, across the Atlantic the Battle of Britain raged, with the Royal Air Force fighting to hold the skies against the German Luftwaffe. Friendly fire during the battle was a serious problem, so the British Air Force pioneered scientific aircraft identification methods, like the WEFT system of categorizing aircraft, which was adopted by the U.S. Navy in 1941. Teaching new recruits to recognize aircraft and ships became a national priority using flashcards, posters, and models. Then, someone in the War Department realized the perfect training tool already existed: Viewmaster, with its stereo imagery and pocket-friendly portability. They approached Sawyers with a question: could Viewmaster help train a nation at war? It would require ramping up production, building better viewers and reel assembly machines, and somehow photographing hundreds of different model aircraft to create the thousands of reels the Navy demanded. Of course, if they agreed, the film restrictions would be waived, but really Sawyers had no choice. Accepting the task meant survival. The stakes could not have been higher, and Sawyers depended on the product's inventor, William Gruber, to pull it off. However, on March 21, 1942, he was summoned to a meeting that would change the course of his life and put everything in jeopardy. Gruber's meeting was with Sam H. Allen Jr., special agent in charge at the FBI office in Portland. Allen needed Gruber to clarify his previous and current relations with Germany. By the time the meeting was over, Gruber knew that his past was catching up to him. What he didn't know was that the FBI were already collecting evidence to confirm their suspicion that he was a German spy. Over the next 4 months, they compiled a damning case. The FBI claimed that Gruber was the founder of the Portland division of the Friends of New Germany, which was an American organization supporting Germany's National Socialist Workers' Party. The original New York division was formed in May of 1933 by direct order of Rudolf Hess, Hitler's deputy. Next, the FBI had accumulated evidence from the prior 2 decades, showing that Gruber publicly supported Hitler's government and that he had worked directly for Hitler. A repairman while working in Gruber's basement had seen a prominently displayed swastika flag and a mysterious locked door that Norma, Gruber's wife, couldn't explain, and that Gruber had written several articles to the editor of the local newspapers supporting Hitler and his efforts in Germany. Their last piece of evidence was the most incriminating of all. On September 15, 1939, Gruber had received a direct wire transfer of $1,042.08 from the Weichsel Bank in Munich directly to his account at the Chase National Bank in New York. This was a smoking gun, direct payment from an enemy state. Could William Gruber, creator of a cherished childhood toy, have been a German spy, or even a member of the Nazi Party? To find out, I interviewed Gretchen Gruber, William Gruber's daughter, who has written a book on her father's life. Heirlooms or whatever?
What happened was when my mother became to the point in her life where she needed to be cared after more, the bathroom that she had was a big, huge bathroom, and there was a screen near the bathtub. And I moved that to the side because I'm going, oh, God, this is going to go to the yard sale. And when I moved it, there was my father's safe. But the safe was not locked, thank God, because no one would have been able to remember the combination. Yeah. So when I opened it, I saw all this paperwork, every single letter, their diaries, things like that. So I thought right then and there, I'm going, well, looks like I'm writing a book.
In his diary, Gruber describes the terrible events that took place in Germany after World War I, and we learn the truth.
Political corruption hit a new high, and people were openly talking about revolution. Enormous masses of people marched uncontrolled and disorderly down Ludwigstrasse in Munich. They marched down Karlstrasse. They marched down Residenzstrasse. Their goal was the king's residence. They shouted and roared, and I followed the endless litany of monotonous outcries. Down with the king! Down with the Kaiser! Long live Wilson! Down with capitalism! Long live democracy!
The story and the deal with me being a spokesperson for my father's political views is that I never knew. I wasn't born until 1950. And we grew up as American kids. We didn't hear about any of this. When I opened up that safe and found all the paperwork, it was the first time I'd ever heard of most of this stuff. I had no idea of any of this.
A crime wave unheard of in the history of the country followed. The communists marched into Munich and took possession of all municipal, state, and federal offices. A reign of terror began. Thousands of elderly people and babies perished for want of food. It was during those frightful weeks that I was stopped at Sendlinger Torplatz by a troop of red soldiers. A man in civil cloth and red armband took my bicycle and asked me if I better not join the Red Forces. I retorted that I was expected home, that I never had any military training, and that I was scared to death. The man laughed and then asked me point blank, "Yes or no? Are you for or against the Red World Revolution?" In my great fear for reprisals, I assured him that my heart was for the Red Movement. "That is all that's necessary. You are going with us. As for your fears, we will teach you how to be brave." I was given a red armband and attached to a machine gun squad.
So his sort of life in the 20s, like while he was in Germany, what did you discover there? Like, that must have all been new information.
Oh, it was. All the hardships that he went through. There was reference when I was a child to his bad foot, because when we would go hiking and stuff, he was always going, well, that's the bad foot and that's the good foot. And I never knew why the foot was the bad foot, but that was when he was being chased by the Red Army and that something fell on his foot.
The Red machine gun squads had made a successful and heroic stand by placing bourgeois children between them and the machine guns, in order that the white hounds could not answer their fire. And now, the shooting began, not from our squad, but from the housetops where the Red machine gunners were nested. The Reichswehr stormed into the houses and drove the Red nests to flight, but they were shot down, one by one. I saw them fall to their deaths, smashing their heads and bones against hard pavement below. I was supposed to carry a large munitions box with another fellow who was as white in the face as I was. Just as we made our way across the railway tracks, my companion carrier dropped the box, which fell right on my toes, and he began to run like a madman. I too began to run as fast as I ever did in my life. and ran right into the yard of the Steinheil Optical Experimental Observatory, where I collapsed. When I woke up, I found myself lying on a table with my feet heavily bandaged. The caretaker of Steinheil had seen me run into the yard and collapse. This caretaker revealed to me that the first thing he had done was remove my red armband because he felt that such a young boy could not possibly be a soldier. Then, in late 1919, a railway employee by the name of Drexler formed a new political party, the National Socialistic German Workers' Party. One of their members was an ex-soldier by the name of Adolf Hitler. My job in the piano house kept me out of politics, to my great despair. However, sometime in 1921, I joined the Nazi Party as a paying member. I believe my membership number was 3750. Whenever I could possibly free myself, I would help to distribute pamphlets that announced a Hitler speech. I attended probably 10 or 12 such evenings, and I received an armband. My armband showed a swastika with a golden bronze metal 5 stamped on it.
When I discovered all of this, it just put another layer of complexity into an already complex man's life.
After coming to America in 1924 and settling in Portland, Gruber did organize the local chapter of the Friends of New Germany in May of 1933.
He was a German immigrant in Portland, Oregon in the 1930s, and his friends that hung out together and would go out to dinner once a week just sort of naturally drifted into this Bund situation when it became a thing. The news from Germany would be 6 weeks old. It was by the time it got to Portland. And so they were always, they were always printing up these stories and stuff, but a lot of it was propaganda.
In May of 1934, Gruber stepped down from the Friends of New Germany.
William says in his diaries and things that it was never about politics to him so much. He was sort of disgusted by the whole thing because nobody was really taking it that seriously, and he just wanted to go hiking.
But what of the suspicious payment? Of course, Gruber had received money from Germany. It was the return of Sawyer's payment for the lenses that couldn't be imported. But would the FBI believe his story? While Gruber and Sawyers were designing their Viewmaster product, another world was unfolding. On February 20th, 1939, 20,000 people packed Madison Square Garden for a pro-Nazi rally in New York City. In the few years since Gruber had stepped down, the Friends of New Germany had dissolved and reformed as the German-American Bund, establishing several US-based training camps. They held rallies across the country, culminating in New York in 1939. At this point, even Hitler distanced himself from them, banning German nationals from being a member of the Bund and forbidding the Bund from using any of his political symbols. Apparently, he found their crazy embarrassing. So you can see why the FBI was taking these groups very seriously. And given his affiliations and pro-Hitler stance, they saw Gruber as more than a sympathizer. They feared he could be a dangerous agent for German interests. By January 1943, their investigation was over, and Gruber faced action under 2 executive orders and for violating his oath as a U.S. citizen. First, Executive Order 8389, When Hitler invaded Denmark and Norway, Roosevelt authorized the U.S. Treasury to freeze all Norwegian and Danish assets in the United States. The intent was to prevent this money from going to Hitler, and when Hitler was defeated, the money would be returned. As the war continued, the order was amended to include German assets. Second, Executive Order 9066. This was Roosevelt's order a couple months after Pearl Harbor to regulate the actions of Japanese Americans in the United States. It authorized the removal of any or all persons from designated coastal areas. And finally, Gruber's Declaration of Intention, the oath renouncing allegiance to foreign powers that he took when he became a naturalized citizen, was now under scrutiny. This was the perfect storm of trouble for Gruber, and on January 8, 1943, he received a letter from the Federal Reserve saying that since he'd sent and received money to Germany, all of his bank accounts, safe deposit boxes, and other assets were blocked. He even had to take any cash he had on hand and turn it in. From this point forward, the government would give him an allowance of $200 a month. 10 days later, on January 18th, Agent Allen arrested him. A hearing was held, and even though Gruber was on his best behavior, the board claimed he is an intelligent and forceful leader, well qualified in the capacity of an espionage agent, and that per Executive Order 9066, Gruber had to leave the state of Oregon immediately. And finally, the government claimed that Gruber must have lied when he renounced his allegiance to Germany, and they began the procedure to cancel his citizenship and deport him. Gruber drove alone to Lewiston, Idaho, and checked into the Lewis and Clark Hotel. As he settled into room 509, the switchboard operator quietly made sure the local police and FBI knew he was there. His wife, Norma, soon joined him, and they rented a small apartment in town. However, Exile and frozen funds left him powerless to help Sawyers fulfill their promises to the government. Harold Graves said, "We are certainly not kidding ourselves that we are going to be able to get along without you. There doesn't seem to be much we can do about it now." And the Navy was putting the pressure on too, as Deputy Chief of Naval Operations John Sidney McCain, who was in charge of training flight divisions, had recommended Viewmaster directly to his boss, Rear Admiral DeWitt Clinton Ramsey, who said in a memo to Sawyers, "It's the best of its kind in the world. Your best efforts are needed to fill the great demand for more stereoscopic range estimators. We know you will not let us down." The pressure to deliver, despite Gruber's exile, was immense. Gruber spent months helpless in Idaho waiting for his hearing. Ironically, it would be a prominent member of the U.S. Communist Party, despite Gruber's deep hatred for communists, who would save him. William Schneiderman, the secretary of the Communist Party in California, was in the exact same situation as Gruber, but the government had already canceled Schneiderman's citizenship and were acting to deport him. Schneiderman took his case all the way to the Supreme Court. As Gruber's hearings began in Portland, Schneiderman's case was being considered. And on June 21, 1943, the Supreme Court decided in Schneiderman's favor. The government could not cancel citizenship solely for violating a Pledge of Allegiance. Gruber's judge postponed his hearing so that their attorneys could adjust their arguments in light of the new legal precedents. 2 weeks later, as the hearings resumed, the judge dismissed the case entirely. Gruber could finally breathe. His citizenship was safe. There was still the issue of Gruber's frozen funds, for which he had to sue the government, claiming that, now that his citizenship was not in question, Executive Order 8389 had been illegally applied to him. As an American citizen, the government could not seize his assets without due process. The judge agreed, and his funds were released in October, and by the end of 1943, all the cases were closed, and William Gruber was allowed to finally go home.
was asked to leave the West Coast. He went as far as Idaho to get him away from the coast in case any of the spy ships he was gonna pass them secret information or something, is what they thought. And then as soon as he was cleared to come back, he jumped right in and they finished the project. So.
Unfortunately for me at least, details of these projects remain scarce, shrouded in wartime secrecy. From today's collectors, we know that they made hundreds of thousands of training reels during the war, from aircraft identification and enemy range estimation to submarine recognition and gunnery training, but the specifics may always be a mystery. Turned out, this mysterious reel wasn't just a relic. It was a piece of history, revealing how a simple toy helped train a nation and survive a world at war. It was a small part of Sawyer's and William Gruber's tireless efforts to support their country. And when the war ended, they could finally return to bringing the magic of Viewmaster to the public, opening a new chapter for families, for entertainment, and for an invention that had now been forged by both global conflict and personal peril. And the reels, once tools of training and secrecy, could now delight generations for decades to come.